Does your community have to have thousands of members in order to benefit from a patient registry? Do volunteers from your community have to dedicate hundreds upon hundreds of hours to start and run a registry? Although a patient registry does require time and dedication, in this video, we'll talk with the CEO and project lead of a rare disease organization to illustrate that you neither need thousands of members nor hundreds upon hundreds of volunteer hours to start a patient registry that can generate data that can be used by pharmaceutical companies and researchers to help your community find effective treatments. Sam Fillingham is the CEO and project lead of PIP UK Poland Syndrome Charity. After her son was born with Poland syndrome, she found herself with nowhere to go for help on the condition. She vowed that anyone affected by Poland syndrome would never feel alone again. Sam has used her experience and love for her son to create PIP UK to raise awareness of Poland syndrome and build a community of people living with the syndrome. Out of her efforts now has grown the Poland Syndrome Register, which is expanding the community to include researchers and key opinion leaders and therefore accelerating research on this condition. And Joshua Henderson is head of rare diseases at Pulse InfoFrame, where he partners with patient advocacy groups and biopharma companies globally to generate high-quality regulatory-grade real-world data. His expertise is in building relationships and fostering collaboration across diverse groups of stakeholders. He focuses on supporting underrepresented populations and advancing the development of treatments for underserved diseases. So Sam, can you explain to us, please, what Poland syndrome is and who or what it was named after?
Sure, happy to. So it's a rare congenital limb difference, and it was named after a Dr. Alfred Poland, which is the first person that's documented as finding the syndrome. So it sounds like the country Poland, but it's actually named after Dr. Alfred Poland.
So although it affects a wide range of individuals, are there some commonalities in their lived experiences?
Absolutely. So, Poland syndrome affects one side of the body. You are born with it. And the most common features of Poland syndrome are that your hand and chest are underdeveloped when you're born. And there's a spectrum of differences there amongst people as well. So, for the hand differences that people are born with, it can range from just a very small hand. You may have all your bones, ligaments, joints, everything in your hand, but it's just a lot smaller than the hand on the other side of your body. And then to the more severe end of the spectrum in the hand difference is you can be completely missing your hand, not have any fingers, any function in the hand. So a real range in the spectrum of hand differences. When it comes to the chest area, the spectrum there ranges from a small part of your pectoral muscle missing to the entire pectoral muscle missing, no breast tissue on that side of the body, missing ribs, fused ribs, a concave chest altogether. And then other symptoms, which are more rare, are for all the organs on that side of the body to be affected as well. So in some severe cases, your heart can be on the wrong side of the body. You can be born without a kidney, and you know your leg can be smaller, your arm can be shorter, and basically every part of that side of the body can be affected by the syndrome.
Sam, I mean, this is too one of the really interesting things about working together with you around now collecting real world data and setting up our Poland syndrome register is that, with there are commonalities that or even have anecdotally heard from patients and families that you work with that there are shared experiences that aren't necessarily documented in the literature or sort of shown to be, part of the disease
Mm.
rather than, related to, to Poland syndrome. And so I think, working together to really in a structured way collect that data from patients and get a better understanding of what is and what isn't part
Yes.
of Poland syndrome will be incredibly valuable, especially down the line as researchers and pharmaceutical companies are looking to develop treatments that address various symptoms and
I think that's one of the real beauties of the register, and what has been our driving force, because it's so difficult to continue having those conversations of, well, we think it's mostly the right hand side of the body, and we think it's mostly girls affected, and we think these are the linked symptoms and linked disorders, but to never have like the real evidence, and to have only a handful of medical papers that even talk to this. It's really difficult to have those substantial conversations in any kind of like medical or research setting. So it's one of the key factors and the driving force for us to work on this register.
Well, and I imagine another barrier to having effective research is certainly misconceptions about
Mhm.
Poland syndrome.
Yeah.
Can you speak to some common misconceptions that still occur today about it?
Yeah, there's some really, really tough misconceptions which have a real adverse effect on our community. I guess the two that stand out to me are the misconception that ladies can be treated with cosmetic surgery when they have a missing chest muscle and missing breast tissue, which is a real barrier to receiving treatment. Because obviously, if you're born without a pectoral muscle and without any breast tissue, then it's a reconstructive procedure. If you so should want that, to have an asymmetrical chest, as many ladies do want to have. But unfortunately, in many medical settings, they're treated as a cosmetic patient. And that's really destructive to people's mental health, and is a real barrier in the certainly in the British healthcare system to actually receiving treatment for ladies with Poland syndrome. So that's one of the toughest ones. Another one that springs to mind is really just a general disregard of it being a disability, because it's not very well recognized and not very well researched. And for someone who's born with a congenital difference to be regarded by the rest of the world as not having anything wrong with them is really, really upsetting and detrimental to many people's mental health.
One of the sort of sets of data that we'll be collecting through the register really centers around quality of life. And so understanding and tracking, over time, how does that align with, various treatment options that patients are getting, and really spanning across, mental health and multiple areas, domains within sort of general healthcare and well-being. That will, aside from the questions related specifically to Poland syndrome, these are sort of generic to patients with rare diseases. And I think the other exciting thing about collecting that data is actually being able to compare that data against the many other rare diseases and conditions that Pulse supports across our other registers. It'll be really interesting to again just sort of infuse our understanding of Poland syndrome and the experiences of patients with data.
Absolutely. To move from that place of like the anecdotal evidence of like we know our community's suffering, we see it and hear it every day, to here is the data that tells you how, and how many and in what way they're suffering, so we can actually do something fundamentally about it. Will be life changing and will really change the outcomes of many, many people in our community.
Well, and this is precisely why a patient registry is more than just a spreadsheet, right? I mean, yes, it's
Mhm.
data, but it's far more than a spreadsheet. So Joshua, can you perhaps explain what a patient registry really is and how it helps communities like the Poland syndrome community?
Yeah, so the way we've set up the register is really to be as accessible as possible and as seamless as possible for patients to share their data in a way that will allow researchers and pharmaceutical companies to develop and to understand what's going on, and develop potential treatment options based on that data. So it's essentially, we've set up an online registration page. Patients from anywhere in the world can access the site, sign up, set up their account, consent to the sharing of data for research purposes, and contribute to this project by again helping us to in a way that will protect their privacy. None of the data that are collected will should be shared with their identifiable information. So really what's done through a registry is to pool that data and aggregate it and de-identify it so that researchers can have the benefit of individual experiences, but at scale. I think that's, we've set it up to be an easy online process, accessible all over the world, and um, in a way that is HIPAA compliant, GDPR compliant, and protects patients.
To mention the resources it saves you, because that's, one of the valid options you have to weigh up as a really small organization of, could we just do this in a safe database? And actually the resources it would require for an organization with one employee to manage a huge set of data like that is just incomprehensible, really. So it is, yeah, so much more than just a spreadsheet.
I think the pieces you'll miss too are, it's we'll be able to add surveys over time. The ability to take what we talked about with quality of life measures and compare that data because it's collected in a standardized way, compare that across other disease areas, to again enrich our understanding of Poland syndrome. So I think there are a lot of opportunities that come when you're collecting it with a platform rather than a simple spreadsheet or database.
As these data are collected, what are the plans to, how do you plan to use the data?
Initially, we really hope to quickly produce a medical paper that will show us just some really basic data which we don't even have access to at the moment. And the things that are really key to us are, how many people in the world are affected on the left or right side of their body? How many people in the world are affected with their hand and their chest, or just chest only? How many males and females are affected? What is the split amongst these differences? And to find those people around the world and to link them together as part of this as well. We really hope that that initial data will be quickly turned into a report and medical paper to really give us the first grasp of the basics of Poland syndrome, which will then give us a springboard to much more in-depth research. Things that we've got in mind are to do surveys around the outcomes of surgical procedures, because there's no specialism in Poland syndrome amongst medics. The types of procedures that are offered are really varied, so the outcomes are incredibly varied. So it'd be really good to get some data on those, and understand which procedures offer the best outcomes long term.
That's how we sort of see registers and their role within an advocacy group in supporting a particular disease or condition, is that it can become a foundational platform where researchers can leverage that data for publications, or pharmaceutical companies can leverage that to find and recruit patients and collect data around patient reported outcome measures, all in a way that sort of adheres to all the best practices and data standards, so that whoever wants to use it, it's high enough quality that it can be used for regulatory decisions. It can be used just for outreach and community support, through the advocacy organization.
I think ultimately as well for us, there is no treatment path and diagnosis path for Poland syndrome. And this is our key to unlocking that forever as well. And then, in the short term, already before we've even started entering data, it's opening the doors to have more conversations with the medical world and generate that interest in the scientific activity, and in starting to research our options earlier in the year for a registry. I started talking to Public Health England and some of the surgeons that were already helping us, and that has led to the first specialist clinic for Poland syndrome in the UK, simply from starting the conversations of we are just about to start a register. We have 160 people that want to already engage in that register. We've got thousands of people around the world that we know will engage further down the line, and that has already happily led to the first specialist clinic in the UK that happened last week, and now 4 more planned for next year, which that's before we've even started entering data into the register. So I think we can already see that it's going to open a lot of doors to this community.
That's really good news. That's amazing. Okay, so how can somebody with Poland syndrome participate in the patient registry to keep the ball rolling and to keep the data coming?
I think in terms of how someone actually participates, they'll access the register by heading to the register landing page, signing up, um, going through kind of an onboarding process, and then when they're logged into the platform, they have a couple of different options. One is to begin entering their data and filling out the surveys, both the general survey that we've created together with PIP UK, as well as the quality of life survey measures that we've developed through our partnership with Quality Metric. They are also have access in the platform to a My Library section to see information, about Poland syndrome, as clinical trials are available. It's really meant to be a resource with ready to go information at their fingertips, so that logging into the platform isn't just about giving of their data to this effort, but also getting value from the various resources and touch points that we can provide back to them through the platform.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that, people should grab a cuppa and sit down and give this some quiet time. Don't be overwhelmed by the amount of data you've got to put in, because for many of us, this will be the first time we've been asked for this type of data. So, set aside some quiet time and put that time into it, and you will very quickly be rewarded by seeing the dashboard of data of everyone else that has already completed it, and you can see how many other people in the world have already done that, how many are left-sided, how many are right-sided. So really quickly you're going to be rewarded and engaged within the register to see who else is filling it out around the world as well, in a de-identified way, of course.
So how did your organization, PIP UK, decide to begin a registry? Can you briefly walk through the steps?
Sure, yeah. So it's actually been 10 years in the making for us as an organisation. So when we first started in 2011, we very quickly started working with the Italian Poland Syndrome organisation, and they already had a patient register over there, and they've kind of mentored us over the years, and their advice 10 years ago was that your patient registry is the foundation and the building block you need to build upon. So we've really been working towards it for those 10 years really, and that was just sort of a journey of being a wholly voluntary organization with very little funding, me being a mum with young children and not enough time to really dedicate to it, until about 2 years ago now, when we got our first grant funding for the organization from the National Lottery to work on finding and funding a register for the first time. And that was really the catalyst to us coming to work with Pulse. So it's really sort of the last 18 months that we've worked on it with funding to do the research and find the register that's right for us, to bring us to this point of finding Pulse. And the real key things for us in that were that we needed our data to be secure. It's so important with the sensitive data that you collect in this, that it's secure and handled properly. And also that the register would be a like really user friendly and engaged platform for our users as well. We have a great community of people that are really engaged and want to start this registry and want to improve treatment and diagnosis. So it's really important to us that we found a platform that would work for them, and something that was a living, breathing way of improving the understanding around Poland syndrome for now and forever.
Right. Nice. And so was it just like a few key people within your organization who made the decision to move forward with Pulse Info Frame, or how did your organization come, like what steps did you have to take,
Yeah.
logistically speaking, I guess?
Sure. So we researched a raft of other registries and weighed up all the options. And then myself and our board of trustees worked through the various options to come to the decision of working with Pulse. I have to give a shout out to Victoria Bedwell, our treasurer, who is also an IT audit data specialist, who helped me work through those options and work really closely with me on reaching that decision. But yeah, it was myself and the board altogether that went for it. And it's the first contract that this organization has ever signed, so it's a huge deal and a huge step for us, and it was very scary signing it, but it's so exciting to finally come to this point where we're going to be filling out our data in a register, and we're very excited about these next steps.
Wonderful to hear. So, I mean, you mentioned earlier about how many people are waiting to get started and participate. How will you keep recruiting patients?
So we're going to have a lot of open forums really to find people and to help people sign up to the register as well. One of our ambassadors has been making videos for us so we can engage with the community across social media with videos. So Rebecca Butcher, one of our ambassadors, has been very busily interviewing sort of 20 people or maybe even more actually across the community to find out what the register means to them, and why they're so excited about the project. So we'll be using our social media a lot to engage with everyone, and share why different people around the world are really excited about this, what it means to them, what it's bringing to them. And then we'll just sort of do webinars and drop-ins and things regularly throughout the year to feedback and share reports with people about what's happening with the data and what's coming out of it. So it becomes a real integral part of what the community talks about when we regularly get together, so people can really be with us on that data journey and see the value of their time in entering this data and participating in the registry.
Nice. So it's not that they just give their data once, as we discussed, they
Yeah,
can give their data and stay engaged and see how they're helping and learn
exactly.
from their data and learn from others' data, but in a de-identified way, right?
Exactly, yeah, and a lot of the people, like the people of older years, shall we say, that talk about it, they're really keen that this is going to be a legacy for them to be part of this. That they didn't have the help that's needed when they were younger, but they can now create a legacy for the people that go after them. And I think that's an incredible gift that a lot of people in this community can do. And it's great that we're going to be able to change the lives of people that are born with Poland syndrome from this day on. But we do hope that we'll be able to do a project about how Poland syndrome affects you in later life as well. So, it will help on both ends.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Those are all the questions that I had. Are there any topics that I haven't asked that you'd still like to address about the Poland Syndrome Register?
I guess a good one to mention is that we don't have long-term funding. for the register and for the organisation. So if anyone's out there that has any fundraising ideas or would like to fund this long term to continue this legacy that we're just about to build and to continue changing the lives of this community, please get in touch with us. We'd love to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and good luck with the register. And I'm sure you'll find lots of people out there willing to participate.
Thank you.